Good morning, and thank you for having me today. I'm super happy to be here to talk about True Sport on the Power of Sport Report 2022. As sport administrators, sport practitioners, sport for development folks, researchers, we all know what good sport looks like. We know that it's what it sounds like, what it feels like, and some of the images on the screen will, bring you in mind, hopefully, of some terrific sport experiences that you can think of yourself. Unfortunately, we also know what bad sport feels like, looks like, and sounds like. Some of the headlines on the screen are just a few of those that we've seen, over the years related to bad sport. We know that the sport experience is never neutral, so we really need to be intentional about making sure that we have positive quality sport experiences. Back in the early 2000s, the Canadian Centre for Ethics in Sport conducted some research, and one of the key findings was that 90% of Canadians believe that sport had the power to positively influence the lives of children and youth. However, less than 20% believed that sport was living up to its potential. So how are we going to close the gap between the sport we have and the sport that we want? So the CCES conducted a number of roundtables. We held a national symposium. We asked Canadians, what do you want your sport experience to look like? And that is where True Sport came from. The True Sport values were chosen by Canadians. They are fairness, excellence, inclusion, and fun. You will all be familiar with the Canadian sport policy values. You'll have your corporate values, and of course, your personal values. Values are what underpin our behaviors. At True Sport, we took the values and we articulated them into a set of 7 True Sport principles. Hopefully, most of you are familiar with these principles. These principles are applicable across all sports at all levels of sport. And actually, they're also applicable in recreation, in the school setting, in the home. We've had many, many people over the years tell us these are just principles that you should live by. So we believe that when you have those 7 principles in the right balance and proportion in your sport experience, you will derive the benefits of good sport. The benefits of good sport are articulated as the opportunity to instill character in our children, to strengthen our communities, and to increase our opportunities for excellence. So creating good sport cultures, we think, will ensure that we provide positive experiences. They will lead to increased participation. More people will come to sport, more people will stay in sport, we'll have better retention numbers, and of course, more people will then be able to realize the benefits of good sport. I think as sport practitioners, we need to think of ourselves as in the business of creating really good people, not just really great athletes. Obviously, through all these processes and instilling of the character and creating good communities, we will find great athletes. We will find people who stay in sport for a really long period of time and achieve podium excellence. However, we will also create a lot of really great citizens and a lot of really strong communities. So I think all of us, the work we do, the reason why we're here today is because we truly believe all that to be possible. However, there are a number of people who also need evidence, they need data, they need information that can back up these claims. So, as a network leader in values-based sport, the CCES undertook a research initiative in 2022 called The Power of Sport, the True Sport Report. This report is actually a follow-up to the original report, which was done in 2008. It was called What Sport Can Do, the True Sport Report. The 2022 report was put together by eAlliance and it was funded through Sport Canada. So within the report, it is divided into sections, and really the idea of the report was to create and provide some concrete evidence of the types of benefits that can be realized with a values-based approach to sport. So what is sport's fundamental role as a generator of social capital or as an opportunity to achieve societal goals? So in 2008, the report was divided into 6 sections: child and youth development, crime prevention, education, social inclusion, economic sustainability, as well as environmental sustainability. When the report was republished in 2022, all of those sections were updated and some new sections were added to ensure the report was very contemporary. So children with disabilities, LGBTQ+ inclusion, the experience of racialized and Indigenous peoples, and climate change. So the report now includes all of these different, I'll call them chapters or sections of a compilation of existing research, all put together in one report. So why do we do the report? The report is really an opportunity for us to recognize the tremendous potential that community sport has beyond the obvious health and wellness benefits. So for a lot of folks outside of sport, They think of sport, they think health, they think wellness. They don't necessarily think about crime prevention or economic impact or inclusion of newcomers to Canada, stuff like that. So it's really important that this report showcases what sport can do for communities. It also is designed to inspire a values-based approach to sport culture, one that will maximize the power and the potential of sport. So we know that not any type of sport will deliver this social good. It has to be good sport. It has to be values-based sport. And we also wanted to provide research evidence to demonstrate that sport is a valuable public asset. So within sport and also as a tool for social development. So who should read the report? The report really has a broad set of target audiences. The report is applicable to all levels of government. It's helpful for folks who work in education as well as community-based organizations. It's information that is pertinent to business leaders, sport for development organizations, as well as decision makers. So there's something in this report for everyone. Given the time that we have this morning, I'm not gonna touch on to all the research. So I know this slide has a ton of stuff on it, but it just to catch your attention, to show you the fact that there is a load of information. There really is something for everyone. There's something that I think will probably apply to whatever it is you're trying to do. And so I would encourage you to explore the report, explore the different sections, and see kind of what research evidence is most meaningful to the work that you're undertaking. With that said, I did want to share a few of the key findings. None of these, I think, are super surprising. The first one being that adults play a significant role in the quality of the sport experience. So children and youth are pretty much unanimous in their reporting that, you know, their parent, coach, mentor, teacher, trainer, official, whatever the role of the adult might be, they have a significant impact on whether the child enjoys the sport experience or whether it's a less positive sport experience for them. So I think we all have to be really mindful about being intentional and taking on that role as we work to instill character in the kids who come to play sport. We also know that more research is needed. I think for you folks, that's, you know, probably a given, but we really need to know a little bit more about the experience of those with intersectional identities. We need to understand what the barriers of inclusion are so that they can be addressed by sport practitioners. One of the troubling findings for me was the fact that many Canadians still remain excluded from community sport. They still have a hard time accessing community sport, and or if they are in community sport, you know, they may drop out. So as an example, 1 in 3 girls versus 1 in 10 boys will leave sport during their adolescent years. If people aren't in the sport experience, they can't, you know, achieve and derive all the benefits that we know sport can offer. And obviously, the last one here that we all know too well is that the pandemic highlighted social inequalities. So we were able to see through the pandemic how important sport was to the social fabric of our country. And we also were able to see that there is a larger gap in terms of those that it impacts most by missing out on the sport experience. So some of the takeaways. We absolutely have an opportunity to build back better. And I think we've seen that. Sport is back, people are on the field of play, and people are doing things differently. We also have a growing awareness of the need for a values-based approach to sport. So some of the things I talked about at the beginning, you know, some of the negative stories in sport, it's really provided us with an opportunity to focus on a positive culture and a culture that will foster fairness and safety and accessibility and be inclusive. And so environments that will really cultivate a positive sport experience. So I think this is a huge opportunity. And I think we're well on the way, many of us, to creating these sport experiences that we know will provide the most benefit to Canadians. So what can you do? You can use the data in the report to inspire decision makers. We've got folks who had the 2008 report, you know, the pages are tattered, the corners are torn, whatnot, you know, they've got sticky notes all through it that they've used that report over and over and over again, whether they were applying for funding or building a business case or talking to, you know, a municipal leader about having a new sport program introduced. So please use the data. Also, for those of you who are researchers, I would invite you to fill the gaps. We know there are gaps in the research, so the more gaps we can fill, the better. And then also, there's an opportunity for us all to use sport as a tool for social good. So it's not just about sport for sport. It's also about sport for development. And it's also just about sport as that tool. It's a really important piece. And then obviously, I would invite you all to activate values-based sport. As I've said time and time again, values-based sport is the sport that is going to create the opportunities that we want for our children. And so I'm sharing this slide at the end, circling back to the beginning. CCS, we use True Sport as our approach to values-based sport. There are many other approaches to values-based sport. There are many people using True Sport as their approach. If you'd like to learn more about the tools and resources, the team at CCS is more than happy to help you. So reach out to us, let us know, and we'd be happy to share ideas amongst other members of True Sport. So please don't be afraid. And then on the last slide, I've given you our address. You can find the report on there. And I would really invite you to use the research, to use sport intentionally, and hopefully in 10 years' time when we redo the report, we'll have less incidences of gaps in the research, we'll have better findings, and we'll have a whole host of Canadians that are benefiting from a really excellent quality sport experience. So thanks so much for your time today. I'm actually not able to be with you this morning, so my colleague is going to now field some questions.
That was great. Thank you. And sport can be good. A value-based approach is truly the right way to approach sport. And I can't wait to ask you a few questions, Liz, because this has been really interesting. And it's a little bit sad that we only had 10 minutes for Karri, because I'm sure there's so much more we could have talked about this morning, right? So my first question to you, Liz, is I'm sure there are more findings in the report, and Karri only had the time to share a handful of them. So in your opinion, what are some of the other key findings that stood out to you that you think will be helpful to share with our listeners today?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Karri sends her regrets, but I'm super pleased to be here. The report has a ton of information, and she gave a few great examples of some key findings. I'll share a few more. Canadian girls experience higher rates of mood and anxiety disorders than their male counterparts, making sport participation increasingly important for this demographic. And girls' participation in sport enhances their body image and self-esteem and leads to an overall higher quality of life. So I wanted to share that one. Another one is individuals with disabilities have reported that their involvement in sport played a role in their development of self-confidence, self-worth, and identity development. So sport programming can also provide opportunities for developing social connections with their peers with and without disabilities. And then just one I really want to highlight for the researchers and people out there listening is that the intersection of multiple marginalized identities can result in an amplification of barriers faced by any one identity on its own. So Canadians with intersectional identities may face, we know they do face, additional barriers to inclusion in community sport. And we don't have enough research in this area. So the report really shone a light on the importance of prioritizing research in this area and understanding our advancement of these individuals' their own experiences.
That's great. You must have been reading my mind, because one of the questions I had was some of the research gaps, right? And we know that there's a lot of researchers out there this morning who are listening to this presentation. Liz, I'm wondering, do you have any advice for the researchers on how they can make the most impact out of their research?
Yeah, I think it's important that the researchers connect with people who are on the ground, who work in community sport, who volunteer in community sport, who coach in community sport, to really understand their experiences and make sure that the research they're doing is applicable, it's accessible to the people who will really use it and benefit from the research the most. Another thing I think is just making sure that the research and the results are presented in tangible, really user-friendly ways. So, whether it's a summary of infographics or statistics or quick facts, just to make it as user-friendly as possible.
So, but you're right. There is a lot of research out there. and there's more that can be done. But the next step is also making sure it gets into the hands of the on the ground, the grassroots level. And you're right, infographics, simple language, actionable findings really make a big difference and really help the grassroots level implement this research that's out there. So thank you for clarifying that. Another question for you, Liz. One of the points Karri mentioned for how to use the report to inspire decision makers. Do you have any suggestions on where those decision makers can begin when they look at this report?
Absolutely. As I mentioned, the report is quite comprehensive. And honestly, a great place to begin is the executive summary. It has an awesome overview of all the key findings. And then from there, decision makers can go to the specific chapter or section of the report that's most meaningful and interesting to them. I'd love to share a great example of a decision maker who used the report. And I'll mention the executive director of the Ottawa Sport Council. So Marcy Morris, she took findings from the report to demonstrate the need for a workshop on creating diverse and inclusive sport environments, to further discuss and identify barriers to participation for equity deserving groups, and really gain a deeper understanding of the lived experiences in sport and the barriers to participation faced by marginalized communities. So from the research, she created the Ottawa Sports Summit, which is happening at the end of November. So just an example of a decision maker utilizing the research and putting it in action.
Yes, and we're good friends with Marcy here at SIRC, and Marcy does create great assets. And I've participated at many of her sports summits, so I know exactly what you're talking about. So thank you for that. I have a great question that came in through the question and answer box here. So thank you for everyone to submit those questions through that button at the bottom of your screen. So thank you for highlighting this key work to integrate all of these areas in your approach. I have a question about systems. Sport is a system in itself, but there seems to be multiple systems focusing on similar goals for youth participants. Do you see any room for other system, example education or media, to collaborate with youth sport? If so, what would you hope may come from these partnerships? That's a big question, Liz. Big question.
Oh, that's okay. No, I appreciate the question. And at the CCES, we always strive to be collaborative. So we're always looking to integrate with other researchers, different community groups. We want to make sure that we have a collaborative approach to everything we do. And for example, absolutely, schools, education, communities, we always want to ensure that the tools and resources that we're putting out are applicable to different groups. So if there are any researchers or community groups out there, like Karri mentioned in the presentation, we're always looking to collaborate and work together. And you know, again, want that research to get into the hands of all Canadians.
Oh, that sounds good. And working together is always better, isn't it, Liz? Absolutely. I have one more question for you, Karri. Liz. Karri provided a snapshot of some of the resources for those who are interested in values-based sport. If you had to pick one place or resource for organizations to start with, what would that be?
Great question. If I had to choose just one, I would suggest it's an infographic entitled True Sport Lives Here, and it's for organizations. And this infographic really provides specific activities and really tangible ideas to help you bring true sport to life and that values-based sport approach within your organization. Maybe I could put it into the chat later so everybody has that resource in English and French. And then the great thing about it is that we also have an infographic for coaches, for communities, for teams, for officials, even for facilities, so that, you know, every member can really see themselves in values-based sport. So I would recommend that resource if I had to choose.
You know what? That sounds like a great resource. And I really love the fact that you've tailored your resources to the audience, because that's one thing we do at SIRC. We do that knowledge translation where we take the research information and we make it accessible to the different audiences, making sure we address each of those audiences' need in the language that audiences seems to hear better, right? So thank you so much, Liz, for taking some time and joining us today and stepping in for Karri, who's away this week. But thank you everyone for the questions, and you'll know where to find the True Sport Report. There'll be a link in the chat box. So thanks again, Liz. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much.